Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time.
In this book, Amanda Montell's Wordslut helps us see a system that's all around us, but pretty much invisible, language itself. It's about how the hidden rules of language decide who gets a voice and who gets silenced.
In Wordslut, linguist Amanda Montell pulls back the curtain on this whole idea of proper or authoritative language, and what she shows is that it's not neutral at all, not even close. It's actually a powerful and, often invisible gatekeeping system.
Okay, so let's actually dive in. Let's try to map out this system that Montell is describing, starting with the core principles that make it all tick.
Montell's main tool for this is a field called sociolinguistics. Now, this isn't about, whether you used a comma correctly. It's about how language works as a social tool. It reveals that the way we talk, and maybe more importantly, the way our speech gets judged by others, is all deeply tangled up with social power.
So if language reflects power, it begs a huge question, right? Who actually gets to set the standard for what sounds credible or professional? Well, the book argues the answer is pretty clear. You have to look at what and who our culture considers the default.
And this right here is the central insight of the whole book. The standards for good language, they aren't objective facts like gravity. Nope, they're defined by whoever has historically held social and political power. You can see this so clearly in English, where maleness often functions as this invisible, unmarked default. Think about it. We specify a female doctor, or even a CEO. Why? Because the base words, doctor and CEO, kind of assume a man is filling the role. Anything else has to be specifically marked. It gets pointed out as a deviation from the norm.
So this idea of a default voice isn't just a passive thing. It's an active system. It reinforces itself through these really powerful feedback loops that end up constraining certain ways of speaking while rewarding others.
One of the biggest constraints Montell points out is something called the double bond. It's a real trap, especially for women in leadership. If they talk in a direct, authoritative way, they get labeled as competent, sure, but also unlikable. But if they use a more collaborative, friendly style, then they're seen as likable, but not really competent. You see the problem? It's a total catch-22. And this sets up a really powerful feedback loop. You see these common speech patterns, especially ones pioneered by young women, and they just get relentlessly criticized. All that constant policing creates this huge pressure for women to second-guess how they sound, which of course can end up silencing them.
And this is so fascinating, there's another loop working in the opposite direction. Montell makes a really strong case that these so-called annoying speech habits aren't mistakes, not at all. In fact, she shows that it's often marginalized groups, and young women in particular, who are the real innovators in language. They're using it as a tool to build solidarity and assert their own form of power.
So how do we wrap our heads around this whole thing? The default voice, the constraints, the feedback loops? Well, it turns out we can visualize this entire system using one really simple but powerful metaphor. I want you to imagine our language standards are like a microphone, but this microphone has been preset, engineered to perfectly pick up one specific default voice. Anyone who speaks with that voice comes through loud and clear. But for those who don't conform, their voices get distorted, filled with static, and dismissed. Not because of what they're saying, but because the system itself isn't built to hear them. Ultimately, this book helps us notice that system at work. The takeaway isn't that some people need to change how they speak to be taken seriously. The whole point is that we all need to change how we listen, to recognize the biases that are coded into our language, and to consciously try to adjust the settings on that microphone. It's about changing how we hear authority, credibility, and power in every single conversation.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.